Weren't you briefly in a version of White Lion?
Oh yeah, that was a learning experience. Yeah.
How so?
Yeah, that was pretty much right after Michael Bolton, maybe a couple of months after. Greg D'Angelo called me and told me that I think the guy's name was Mike Spitz, the bass player.
Dave Spitz, maybe?
Dave Spitz. Mike was the guitar player, right. So that Dave he was either fired or he left, I don't know what, and that, would I want to come and audition? And I remember seeing White Lion in a club version at L'Amour in Queens, which is a big rock club. And I just remember seeing Mike Tramp come out on stage and saying to myself, Jesus Christ, the girls are going to go crazy over this guy. Like, he was like David Lee Roth on steroids. Like, as far as his whole stage persona. And fortunately and unfortunately, I mean, if you ask me today, I miss that because I miss the real rock star. I miss the guy that you see walking down the street that looks like insane, crazy, and people going, holy shit, who is that? Like, you don't see that anymore. Those days are long gone. So, when I saw somebody like Mike Tramp, I'd be like, that's one of those guys. Like, this guy's going to be a star. So I remember that. Musically, I didn't remember too much, but I remember Mike Tramp. So when Greg called me about that, I went to audition. And I got that gig, which was great, and was in that band probably for 6 months, and I quit because I realized that it was going to be a dead end for me. Because at one point, I think it was Fight to Survive, the White Lion album, Fight to Survive, was already out. And so they were getting ready to go for round 2 and do demos and get label interest and all of that. We were basically just doing club shows. And I remember Greg calling me up saying, Bruno, man, he goes, I know you've played me your songs. You got great songs. You need to show the band your songs. Show Vito and Mike your songs. They're really good. And I would be like, yeah, really? You think that they'd be into me contributing as a songwriter? And Greg was like, yeah, sure. Why don't you do that? So I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. So one day we were at rehearsal. We used to rehearse in the basement of L'Amour in Brooklyn. So that's where their gear was set up. And I remember there was a giant mirror it was like a long, rectangular, narrow room, very narrow. So the gear was set up against one wall, and then there was literally maybe, I think it was like 10 feet from one side of the room to the other side. And on the other side of the room was a giant mirror. And so Mike Tramp would always yell at me for not banging my head enough. And I would tell him, I would say, I'll do it during the show. I don't want to get a headache. I'm not doing it right now. And he'd be like, Bruno, you're not banging your head enough. You've got to bang your head, with his Danish accent. And so we'd have to sit there in front of the mirror and pretend head banging during the set. And I always thought that was ridiculous. But anyway, getting to the point, I remember coming in rehearsal that day, and Vito was sitting in a chair in front of his amp, noodling on the guitar, and I just walked up to him and I said, hey, I know you guys are getting songs together for a new demo, and I just want to let you know that if you want, I got a lot of ideas. Maybe we could get together and I could show you some of the stuff that I wrote. And he was like looking down. I remember he was looking at his guitar, and he stopped playing and he just looked up at me and he said exactly these words. He said, "You're the bass player. Play the bass." And then he looked down back at his guitar and kept playing. At that moment, I just knew, I go, well, this is a dead end for me. If I ever want to, I'm only going to be a bass player in this group and never have it'll never be a true band. So not soon after that, I quit.